Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're in the middle of the Hachaim, Parshat Miketz, Parak Aleph, Pasuk Lamed Gimel. So we got to the point that Yosef Tzaddik interprets the dream that Paro had, and thereby telling him that Mitzrayim will enjoy 7 years of abundance, 7 years of tremendous growth in the economy, in the agricultural fields, followed by 7 years of tremendous famine. And therefore, Paro should be aware of it and take the necessary steps to protect Mitzrayim. The next psukim from Parak Lamed Gimel, the next 3 or 4 psukim, the Torah takes a very interesting turn, where Yosef Tzaddik takes upon himself to start giving advice to Paro how to set up Mitzrayim. Now, interestingly enough, the advice that Yosef Tzaddik gives to Paro does not seem to be in any way hidden in the dream. It wasn't that Yosef Tzaddik saw in the dream things and ideas what to do. Rather, either Yosef Tzaddik gained tremendous expertise in how to be a finance minister or logistics manager from being the chief of staff of Potiphar. Potiphar was a big businessman. Yosef Tzaddik, as we know from last week's Parshat, was extremely successful, and it could be like Moshe Rabbeinu learned how to be a melech, a leader in Paro's house. Yosef Tzaddik learned the different tricks and advice and strategies of how to set up an economy and how to set up a logistics and shipping system in Potiphar's house. Or a more mistaber, a more rational answer would be is that when Hashem gives someone the spirit, siyata d'shmaya, the wisdom flows through this individual naturally. Yosef Tzaddik at this point was 30 years old, and the last period of time, 2 years, he was in jail, or 10 years he was in jail. So he didn't have a lot of world experience. Remember, he was kidnapped at 17. He was sold at that time. He wasn't like a 60-year-old seasoned veteran. So it's incredible, as we're going to see from the Hachaim, the advice that Yosef Tzaddik gives is tremendous, to the point that even Paro himself had to acknowledge that even though Yosef was a slave, was an Eved, that Yosef Tzaddik was the smartest individual. There was nobody wiser than Yosef in Mitzrayim. So let's see the advice that Yosef Tzaddik gives. Again, as I pointed out before, none of this advice, it seems to be, was hidden in any way in the dreams of Paro. And the Hachaim begins with a very interesting question. Tam Yosef shenasa yoitz lamelech. Why did Yosef decide to become, or to put himself in a position that he should be the advisor to the king? Paro only requested from Yosef to interpret the dream. As we explained, Yosef then took it a step further and started giving Paro, as we're going to see, detailed advice and strategies of what to do next. He wanted to explain to Paro why Hashem had showed Paro what was going to happen in the future. Why did Hashem tell Paro that there will be 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine? Now, of course, with respect to Yosef, it was to get Yosef out of jail. But Hashem could have done it in many different ways. Why did Hashem choose to show to Paro? Because there was going to be an event, as we're going to see, that was going to affect Mitzrayim in a very big way, and in actuality affected a large part of the world in a very big way. The purpose of the dream was that Paro, should appoint officers, that since the skinny cows swallowed the big cows, to teach us that the people will sustain themselves from the years of good times. The fact that the skinny cows ate up the heavy cows, that was a sign that where will their sustenance of the skinny cows, i.e. the people when they have no food, will come from the days of good. Ish navan v'chacham. So Yosef continues, Paro should seek out a navan, a discerning, and a wise man. What's the difference? So Yosef first told Paro, you have to find a smart person that will know how to store the wheat, that it should not rot. Remember, as we're going to see, Yosef told Paro he has to store wheat for 7 years. Now, to store wheat for so long time, you have to know weather factors, humidity, dampness, location, geography. All these things are very important into keeping the grain fresh and available, right? Also to keep out, right? Any types of rodents or insects and the like. And therefore, that's all things that are extremely important in choosing the right person. Chacham is a person that knows all different types of wisdom. Ladas chochmas hatishbairis. He will have to know geometry, vihandasa, and arithmetic, vahamispar, and he has to know how to count. These are all important tools in how to properly build warehouses that will have the correct amount of ability to store items, to be able to bring items out, to have people come in. Just for example, today, shipping docks, aisles, height, coolness, depth, and all these things are important. Victim navon, and the navon part was first because ki hadavar ma'akav Yosef kedesh iskam etvuah. Hachaim points out a very interesting thing that Yosef told Paro that the most important thing is that individuals should know how to store their grain. Obviously, it's important how to get the grain out of the warehouse, but if the guy doesn't know how to store the grain and the grain rots, so there's no point of having the most state-of-the-art warehouse if there's no food to get out of it. Yasa Pare. So Yosef continues that Pare should take action. Kavonas advarmhem ki hiskil Yosef shetam achaloimhu v'tzad keshamevi sheva shnei sava b'shoifa Yosef shar shonim. Yosef understood that the purpose of the dream was that Paro should store and to take advantage of the 7 years of abundance that he should there should be extra food. If the dream did not convey this, now we're going to see Hachaim teaches us how Yosef was an economics genius. Yosef understood from the dream that each one of the 7 years were going to be needed to sustain Mitzrayim for the next 7 years of famine. That it wasn't enough just one good year. What happens is that a person has a very good year, especially in the fields. The next year he takes it a little easier. People don't have to, work as hard, because if the field produces a bumper crop for 3 years of food, so they'll take it easy the next year, a little easier the third year, and that will make people less motivated to plant. And Yosef understood from the dream that they needed the total output of 7 years, the grain for 7 years, to help them sustain the famine of 7 years, which is a tremendous amount. Which means that it's very possible that every year of the good year was resulted in 3 good years. So that would be a total of 21 years, for example, right? And Yosef understood that, just for an example, that the 7 years of famine would require, in actuality, 21 good years of food. So just to make let's just review this last point. Yosef Tzaddik understood that if the first year of the bountiful period of time would produce a bumper crop that could last for 3 years, then people wouldn't plant for the next 2 years. Why should they plant? They have enough food. Or they would plant a little less, 20%, 30%, just to keep, the ground and the field fertile. But Yosef understood that they needed to maximize every year of output and store it to help sustain Egypt during the 7 years of famine, which is a tremendous thing, as Hachaim now is going to explain in detail. If the grain of the first year would be a bumper crop, when the second year would come, people would relax. What's the rush? We have plenty of food. We could take a half a year off. We don't have to plant the whole field. We'll plant a quarter of the field. Because they'll say the first year produced enough grain for 3 years. So why do we have to work so hard the next year? The Hachaim says an unbelievable thing. Because there will be so much grain, the price will drop. And you know what happens when the price will drop? There's no incentive for farmers to plant. In America, there's so much land and there's so much abundance of food that if every farmland would be planted, the food prices would drop tremendously. And therefore, they would actually, in the long run, cause tremendous harm. The government realized that they have to pay people not to farm in order to keep prices at a certain level. Because if prices drop to basically where it costs a lot more to produce food than to sell the food, people are not going to produce the food. So the government always tries to find some sort of balance to incentivize farmers not to plant every square inch of land. Today it's a slightly different because there's a lot of other opportunities that come out from the ground, but in general, a lot of land that could be planted is not planted for this problem. And then makes people less motivated to spend money on plowing, planting, hiring workers. And then in the second year crop, which also will be blessed, they're going to plant even less. So actually, all the things that were set up to help you, if it's not properly managed, it will actually end up hurting everybody. And in the end, they'll only have 2 or 3 years of grain, and they'll actually be used for the 7 years of plentiful. And therefore, Yosef HaTzadik told Paroi that you have to ensure that there were people, there's an organization, there's a system set in place that every year of the 7 years of plentiful, they should plant to the max. And everything should be then taken and stored to be kept for the 7 years of famine, so that people should not become lazy. People should not say that let's not plant because we have enough food. And also the prices will remain stable to motivate people to continue to plant. Then the Hachaim says in the next pasuk, Yosef HaTzadik tells Paroi that he should take a 20th of all the grain. Why should he take a 20th? For one of two reasons. Either because Paroi was the one that told the people, hey, this is what's going to happen, and therefore since I was the one that helped you prepared and gave you the information, I deserve an extra 10th, because normally Meiser is only 10%. Or second reason is that Yosef set up a secondary system, a backup, which is also an unbelievable thing. That just in case the people themselves, which ended up being correct, would not properly store food, Paroi would have himself a backup supply from the extra 10% that he took to help to provide, right, that people shouldn't starve to death. And that was the secondary purpose that Yosef HaTzadik told Paroi, that he should take from everybody 20%. An extra 10% which would set up as an emergency reserve just in case things didn't work out exactly as they were planned. We see from here that when Hakadosh Baruch Hu rests his spirit on somebody, even if that individual is not brilliant or smart or experienced, the wisdom and the chachma that comes out of him is unbelievable. And throughout the Doros, we see many tzaddikim that had tremendous siyata d'shmaya in all different advice. Things that, people would go to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. What did he know about business? What did he know about this? And he gave people tremendous advice of siyata d'shmaya because the Ruach Hashem spoke to him. Baruch Hu should give us bracha and atzlacha and the Chanukah. Right, Miketz is usually a parsha that falls on Hanukkah. This is one of the few rare years that Miketz is not Hanukkah, but we should be zoiche that the days of Hanukkah should mashpia on us throughout our life. Amen.